Hello, dear friends, and welcome to our weekly program called The Spirits Report in the Gospel According to Spiritism. As you may know, the Gospel According to Spiritism is structured into several chapters, and each chapter gives us Allan Kardec, a quote from the Bible, from the Gospel, Allan Kardec's interpretation, and the Spirit's teachings. And in this program, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we're focusing on the Spirit's teachings. What we do is we lean on the chapter as much as the Spirits are leaning on the chapter, just giving a very brief summary, and you're invited to read it, as well as the Spirit's reports, Spirit's teachings, since we will only pick out certain aspects of it. So, dear friends, very welcome. It's a pleasure. What we will do is start off today with chapter 3 in the Gospel According to Spiritism. If you like to read along and orient yourself on the subject matter, you may turn it to page 67 in this particular edition. And chapter 3 is entitled, "There are many dwellings in my Father's house." What could Jesus have meant with that, by that? So Allan Kardec goes into his interpretation, and the first section is entitled "The Different States of the Soul in the Errant State." Then he talks about the different categories of inhabited worlds, which is, we want to give a quote from that, so we have a little bit of an idea what the Spirit's teachings are based on. So here he educates us that primitive worlds, that there's many dwellings in my Father's house. What he basically means by that is that there is many, many, many different worlds, many, many, many different planets in this universe. We can't even count them. That's how many there are. And each and every planet has a different consciousness level. Yet, according to Allan Kardec, there are certain categories. Let's say planet Earth falls into a fairly low vibrational, low evolutionary category. And there's many planets like planet Earth, which display the same kind of soul knowledge. So the same kind of lack of purity, for lack of better words. So here are the categories that Allan Kardec helps us to understand. He says there's primitive worlds, and the primitive worlds are the worlds of trial and expiation, where evil dominates. So the primitive worlds, that's where evil dominates. Now, how do we define evil? In the Spirit's book, we find the definition. It's ignorance. It's when we just don't know better yet. So it's just like a 2-year-old who doesn't know better yet. It's still more ignorant than we are, and a more evolved spirit is less ignorant as we are. So there's the primitive worlds. Then the next one is the regenerative worlds, where souls who still have something to expiate may absorb new strength by resting from the fatigue of struggle. So that's the next step up. And many of us are very much aware of the fact that planet Earth is transitioning from a subcategory of a primitive world, which could be labeled as a world of atonement. It's a world of trial and expiation. In our world, planet Earth, that falls into this first category, basically. We still have evil dominate. We're learning through pain, through the contrast. But Earth is on its way in its transitional phase to become a regenerative world. Yay! And that means where souls who still have something to expiate may absorb new strength by resting from the fatigue of struggle. We want to be there, don't we? Like a fast forward button. If only there was a fast forward button. And then the next category is the happy worlds. And in the happy worlds, the good outweighs evil. So spirits who dwell on the happy worlds, much more advanced, much more purified, much more aligned with God's will. And then the next category is the heavenly or divine worlds, the habitations of purified spirits where the good reigns completely. Earth belongs to the trial and expiation category. And this is why humans on it are the target of so many miseries. And they're talking about us. As a matter of fact, Allan Kardec is talking about us. This is why there's so many miseries here on planet Earth, because we have a long way to go. Now, that's not a reason to feel defeated. We know it lies in our own capacity, in our own responsibility to expedite our purification. And we know why, how. We have Spiritism at our hands, thank God, out of God's mercy and grace. This lifetime, we have so many tools. So what do we need to do? Primarily, strengthen the two wings of our bird body. One wing is the wing of knowledge, studying, acquiring new skills. And the other wing is love, is making use of our skills, of our gifts, of our knowledge, and make ourselves useful for the common good, useful for our brothers and sisters, not just for our own self. This is how we ascend to God, according to Emmanuel, in thought and life. Let me say hello to the beautiful friends who've joined. It's like itching me. Let me get to Hey, Kiki, there you are. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. And Mark Carlos, thank you for joining. And Nora Brazil, yay. Thank you for being here. And I think there's a few more, so please say hello and introduce yourselves. So now we're moving on to the Spirit's teachings. So the first, there's many different items, and we won't be covering them all today. So we will continue. Part 2 will be next Sunday. But we're going to talk about the largest section of it, which was written by whom? We know it's the Spirit's teaching, so it comes from the Spirits, not from Allan Kardec. And here it is a summary of the teachings of all the Spirits. And he probably means of all the Spirits that came through, not all the Spirits that exist in the universe. But this is a summary of many Spirits. So let us see what they're saying about Jesus' statement, there are many dwellings in my Father's house. And for that purpose, we're going to share the screen. And let us do that right now. And then we're going to run a little test to see whether it comes through. Let us see here. Share. So thank you for bearing with me. So we have this now, and play from start. Now let us see. I'm going to run a little test. Go to Facebook and observe what is happening. Yeah, well, let's see. One more minute. So here it is, Gospel according to Spiritism, Spirit's teachings, and we're moving on to the next slide. Is it moving? Thanks for your patience, dear friends. Yes, it is. Okay. We are in good company. All right. Again, we're not going to read everything, but we're picking out most of it. So, highly evolved and less evolved worlds is the title of the Spirit's teachings of this particular section, which is a summary of many spirits. And they say the categorizing of worlds as either less evolved or highly evolved is more relative than absolute. And we can follow that. There is no absolute line between all the different categories, but it is relative. Relative to what? And here's the answer. A world is less evolved or highly evolved in relation to those that are above or below it on the scale of progression. So when we say it's a less evolved world, then it is a relative statement about the level of evolution, the scale of progression on that particular planet. And the same is true when we say it's a more highly evolved world. It's more highly in respect, in relation to the lower worlds, right? So Allan Kardec is a scientist, among other things, and so he defines the terms he's using, and the spirits, of course, help us further to make it clear. And these spirits, they help us to see why these categories and how these definitions came about. So then they say, on the least evolved worlds, the beings that inhabit them are, to a certain extent, rudimentary. They have the human form, but are devoid of any beauty. So now we're learning of the characteristics of the least evolved worlds. So the humans that live there, the spirits that inhabit these worlds, are rudimentary. They're devoid of any beauty, but they have a human form. Their instincts are not tempered by any sentiment of refinement or benevolence. No refinement, no benevolence. Or by any notions of right or wrong. So they cannot distinguish yet between right or wrong. Brute force is the only law. With no industry or inventions, they spend life in conquest of food. So survival is their primary purpose. They're conquesting food. That's what they do primarily. Nevertheless, and here's the good thing, God does not abandon any of his creatures. Thank you, God. In the darkest depths of their mind lies the latent, sometimes more, sometimes less developed, vague intuition of a supreme being. So even though they're rudimentary, they have no sense of beauty, they're purely instinctual, they don't know yet what's right or wrong, they're using brute force and they spent their life in conquest of food, God has not abandoned them. Because God loves all of us, the tiniest little cell, the tiniest little worm, everything. It doesn't matter what it is. And in these worlds, God too loves each and every one equally. So God does not abandon them. And in the depths of these spirits' minds that inhabit these worlds lies a vague intuition of a supreme being. So they somehow know God exists. It's beautiful, isn't it? This instinct is enough to render some more advanced than others and to prepare their ascension to a more complete life. For they are not degraded beings, and this is important. These beings are not degraded, but children who are growing up. And this is a very merciful statement and is something for us to download. Right? So when we look around on planet Earth and we want to slip into judgment because somebody is, in our eyes, in our judgment, more ignorant than we are, let us keep in mind that God loves us all equally. And we're not, these people, or we are not degraded beings. We're learning. We're growing up. It's a very benevolent way of looking at all. In between the lowest and highest degrees, there are innumerable levels, he says. So these categories that we said, of course, it's not like, okay, here's a hard and fast line and you're in a primitive world, or then there's a line and you're in a regenerative world. There's many gradations in between. It's always more complex than we think, right? But that's good to know. So now we're moving on to item 9, same chapter, highly evolved and less evolved worlds. In worlds that have reached a highly evolved degree, so now we're talking about the higher evolved worlds, the conditions of moral and material life are very different from those on Earth. So here the spirits draw now a comparison to our planet. Yes, we're part of the primitive worlds, and the spirits are now describing to us what we are looking forward to. This is a sneak preview of what's to come in our lives if we do the work. If we strengthen those two wings 24/7, because the nighttime is as important as the daytime, we're practicing the good. We're charitable. This is what's going to await us, and it's beautiful. So I invite you to sit back, relax, have a nice cool drink next to you, and enjoy the ride, the dream. So here we go. The corporeal form, as everywhere else, is always the human form. So we will still have a human form in those worlds, but it is embellished, perfected, and above all, purified. The body possesses nothing of earthly materiality, and consequently is subject neither to the needs, the diseases, nor the deteriorations that the predominance of matter engenders. So we still have the human form, but we're free of the needs and diseases and the deterioration of our bodies that are caused by our predominance of matter, our density. The senses, more refined, have perceptions that the denseness of the organs stifle on this world. So here on earth, we're stifled. The senses could be so much more acute, but they're not, because we're in a dense body, and so are our senses. They match the density of the world we live in and the body we have. So our senses will be much more acute. The specific lightness of the body enables rapid and easy locomotion. Instead of dragging itself laboriously over the ground, like what we do, right? Shuffling along, it glides, so to speak, over the surface or sails through the air with no other effort than that of the will, in the way in which angels are portrayed. So we will be so much lighter, and our locomotion will be more of a gliding nature, angel-like, almost volitating. And our movement is based solely on our will. Depending on their wishes, on the spirit's wishes, those inhabitants' wishes, humans retain the features of their past migrations and appear to their friends as they were known to them, but illuminated by the divine light and transfigured by inner impressions that are always of an elevated nature. So now the spirits tell us that even though we may be living in an advanced world, in a more purified world, when we appear to our loved ones, doesn't matter on what world they are dwelling, we will take on the form, the physical form, and the features of the lifetime that we walk together on whatever planet it was, let's say on Earth. That is why we, those spirits who can see, recognize loved ones, friends, even sometimes our mentors, because they show themselves to us in a familiar shape. But when they're coming from a higher world and they're dwelling in a higher world, then their features are coming with a lot of light. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And of course, we receive those accounts in all the André Louis books, right? And of course, Emmanuel talks about it. So Spiritism is filled with the accounts where higher spirits come to the aid of their loved ones in lower worlds. And they appear to them in the familiar shapes when needed. So here we are. So instead of pallid faces stricken by suffering and passion, intelligence and life radiates from that splendor, which painters have portrayed by the halo or aureole of the saints. So these beings from higher worlds have been portrayed as angels. We know them from the paintings with the halos. We even have a halo emoji, face with a halo on it, right? That is signifying a being from a higher world. It's funny that we even have an emoji, right? So this is something for us to note. The little resistance that matter poses to highly advanced spirits renders the development of bodies more rapid and infancy short or almost non-existent. So in these worlds, infancy is very short and everything happens faster. And that is due to the absence of matter. Matter is much less dense. In the absence of worries and troubles, life is proportionately much longer than on Earth. In principle, longevity is proportional to the degree of advancement of each world. So the longevity depends on the advancement on each world. So this is very interesting as well. And because of the absence of worries and troubles, life is proportionately much longer than on Earth. So that gives us a little bit of a clue of something that maybe we can play with even on this planet, right? Then they say, death holds none of the horrors of decomposition. Of course not. Why? Why does death hold none of the horrors of decomposition in higher worlds? Well, because their bodies are less material. So there is little or no decomposition. Far from being an object of dread, death is regarded as a happy transformation, which is already what we're learning through Spiritism. Because in such worlds, the doubt as to the future does not exist. See, things become easier when we become more knowledgeable and more advanced, more purified. So as you can see, so the bodies develop faster due to little resistance of matter, infancy almost non-existent, life much longer due to no worries and troubles, longevity proportional to the degree of advancement of each world, death holds no horror of decomposition, death is a happy transformation as a matter of fact, no doubt of the future any longer. And the soul radiates during life, the soul not being enclosed within the compact matter, radiates and enjoys a lucidity that places it in an almost permanent state of emancipation and allows for the free transmission of thought. How wonderful. So the soul radiates and enjoys lucidity. It radiates light, excuse me, and enjoys lucidity, which means much bigger picture is visible. Yes, life in the more evolved worlds will be a pleasure, comparatively speaking. So now let us move on to item 10, same chapter, highly evolved and less evolved worlds. On such blissful worlds, relationships between nations are always friendly. So now we're learning more categories. No more wars, no more contention. Will be all done. And all of this we can prepare for, we're invited to prepare ourselves for right now, every minute of each day and night. And we can practice exactly in our relationships today that our relationships will be friendly. No more contention, no more wars. So knowing what we're working towards, we can practice it already. We can go to the gym of the soul and strengthen our muscles of the soul daily and nightly. So relationships are never disturbed by the ambition of dominating their neighbor or by war, which is its consequence. So no more domination. None of what's happening on planet Earth, right as we speak, once again. There are no masters, no slaves, or privileges of birth. There's no masters, no slaves. There's no power over. It's equality. And there's no privileges of birth, like here on planet Earth. So there's a child born into the royal family, the so-called blue bloods. That's a privilege. Or a child born into a wealthy family. It's a privilege, right? Doesn't exist anymore in the higher worlds. Only moral and intellectual ascendancy establish the differences of conditions. So the difference of conditions is not based on material goods anymore, or blue blood, or any of that. No, it's not. It's not based on power over. In other words, there's masters and there's slaves, and we can translate into bosses and workers, or whatever label we want to give it, right? No, none of that. It's only the moral and intellectual ascendancy, the two wings, right? The two wings, love and wisdom. Authority is always respected. Authority is always respected, for it is conferred only on those who have merit, and it is always exercised with justice, and that's what makes the difference. We can't be blindly obedient. Actually, as a matter of fact, in the Gospel according to Spiritism, Allan Kardec helps us to understand that obedience is the consent of reason on this planet. But once we graduate to a higher world, we learn right now that those who are in authority on these worlds are being respected. Why? Because their authority is not based on privilege, being born into a family of power or money or whatever it may be. It's based on merit. And with that comes absolute justice. And then we can relax and lean back. Say, they know, right? Humans do not try to raise themselves above others in those worlds. Humans do not try to raise themselves above others, but only above themselves by striving for perfection. Isn't that beautiful? So we'll say that again. Humans in those worlds, do not try to raise themselves above others, which is common here on planet Earth, but only above themselves by striving for perfection. Once again, thank you, spirits, for giving us this information. Thank you, Allan Kardec, for codifying Spiritism for us, because this sentence alone, which is actually written in italics in this book, because it's so important, is like a recipe for success. Because why? Because we can practice it right now. We can even hang it on our mirror. Do not try to raise yourself above others, but only raise yourself above yourself by striving for perfection. That's our mantra. That's our work. The objective, so the inhabitants of these worlds' objective, is to reach the class of the pure spirits. That makes them study ardently in order to become like them. Are we studying ardently to become like pure spirits? Because once again, we can start it now. Hopefully we have already. Let's see, where were we? All the tender and elevated sentiments of human nature are found there, augmented and purified. Here we are. Humans are not to try, do not try to raise themselves above others, but only above themselves by striving for perfection. A bond of love and fraternity unites all humans on these planets. A bond of love and fraternity. The strongest help the weakest. Are we helping our weaker brothers and sisters? Their possessions vary to a greater or lesser degree according to what they have acquired by means of their intelligence. But no one suffers for lack of necessities, since no one is undergoing expiation. Aha! So this is a huge difference, because now we're not in the world of trials and expiations anymore, which planet Earth is, because that work will have been completed by that state. So no one will then suffer for lack of necessities. Everything is equally distributed, since no one is undergoing expiation. In other words, evil does not exist. So, well, it's in our own hands. That's all we can say, right? It's in our own responsibility, lies within our own hearts and minds and in our own soul, how quickly we want to get there. Because we can as we made the list here in the PowerPoint, and if you guys would like it, I'm happy to pass it out. Just let me know. That's the list. We can make the list and we can put it somewhere and say, okay, when we do our nightly review, check. Oh, maybe I need a little bit more work on that. Oh, maybe I need to work on this a little bit more. So we can go about it like Ben Franklin. He had his list of 10 or 12 virtues, and he made a grid and he picked out 3 to 5 virtues. I don't know exactly the numbers now, per week, and he worked on it. And then he reevaluated it and he talked to his enemies to find out, hey, how am I doing? So we can do the same. We're moving on to item 11 of the same chapter. And here we learn more. On your world, you need evil. So now the spirits are talking to us about planet Earth. On your world, you need evil in order to sense the good. It's true, right? We need night to admire the light. We need sickness to appreciate health. On highly evolved worlds, such contrasts are not necessary. Eternal light, eternal beauty, and eternal serenity of the soul provide an eternal joy that is disturbed neither by the anxieties of material life nor contact with evil persons who have no access there. How wonderful. So we learn through contrast. Still, we need that. But once we graduate from this state, then the eternal light and beauty and serenity will provide eternal joys for us. And any evil spirit will not be allowed, has no access to these worlds. This is what the human spirit finds most difficult to comprehend. Ingenious at painting the torments of hell, it could never represent the delights of heaven. Why not? Because, being little evolved, and they're talking about us, it has borne only pain and misery. And not having glimpsed the heavenly splendor, which we haven't, it can only speak of what it knows. As the human spirit evolves and purifies itself, however, the horizon becomes resplendent, and it comprehends the good that lies ahead, as well as the evil that has been left behind. So what are they saying here? They're telling us that on planet Earth, we haven't really glimpsed how life on a higher plane will be. We're reading about it, which helps us to paint an internal picture of those worlds, and it's extremely helpful. But we haven't experienced it yet. We don't know how it feels to be there. So we have a tendency to report only about what we have experienced so far, and that's pretty hellish. And so that's why they're saying, because why are we doing this? Because we're little evolved. And so far, we've primarily experienced pain and misery. And this is not our first lifetime. It's most likely has been worse before. So we can't talk about something that we haven't experienced yet. So that's why our conversations, our pictures, our fears, our sentiments are still very much colored by pain and misery. And of course, we're seeing pain and misery all around us. And most likely, at least at times in our own lives. As the human spirit evolves and purifies itself, however, the horizon becomes resplendent and it comprehends the good that lies ahead. And that is the light at the end of the tunnel. And so this chapter is so wonderfully positive because it shows us where we're headed. Let us move on to item 12, which is the last one. So now they're wrapping up and saying, nevertheless, such fortunate worlds are not privileged, for God is not partial towards any of his children. So they're saying, even though life will be so absolutely gorgeous in those worlds for set reasons, these worlds are not privileged. Can we believe it? They're not privileged. Why? Because we've worked for it. It's not like God says, okay, you are the one who's now like here on planet Earth, a child being born into wealth, into money, into fame. That's a so-called privilege. Now we in Spiritism know it's actually a challenge, but it's looked at as a privilege. But in these worlds, it's all built on merit. So these worlds are not privileged. The beings who live there, they've earned to live there. God is not partial towards anyone. Let us remember that. There is never, God will never, ever, ever, and all the laws are aligned with that, prefer one being over another. It's hard to imagine, right? Because we're still so wired of seeing better and worse everywhere. Oh, that person has more, or this person does that, or this person looks this way, and oh, I feel better because this person has less, right? As long as we're pretty ignorant, which we all are here on planet Earth. And that's not a put down, it's just an observation. So, one more time, such fortunate worlds are not privileged. Why? Because God is not partial towards any of his children. And if God isn't partial, we are invited to start practicing not being partial ourselves. Because as we are ascending and we want to ascend, that's what we get closer to. We're ascending towards God, right? He gives to all the same rights and faculties to ascend to such worlds. We all have the same faculties and the same rights. God makes all start from the same point and endows no one with more than the other. We were all created equal and ignorant, simple and ignorant. All of us started from the same point, and that we learn in the Spirit's book. The highest positions are accessible to all, and it is their responsibility, ours, to win them through what? These highest positions, we can win them through what? Labor. The law of labor, through work, making ourselves useful, accumulating knowledge, being of service. So we win them through labor to reach them as soon as possible, or to linger through centuries and centuries in the underworlds of humankind. And that's where this part of the chapter ends, where this item ends. It's a summary of the teaching of all the spirits that Allan Kardec gives us. And it ends on a beautifully positive note. One more time, we're never the victims. We are co-creators. It's our responsibility to expedite our purification process or delay it. And now we know what we're looking forward to, dear friends. This is another good news, piece of good news. So here we are. So in gratitude, let us close our eyes for a moment and let us connect with our open hearts and our open minds deeply in gratitude with God. God who is so wise, God who is so just, so merciful, all perfect, who created this universe beautifully and harmonious. Thank you, God, for creating us too, and creating us all equal. All of us ignorant, but the same, so that we can learn through our many, many lifetimes, our many, many experiences, and ascend based on our own merit towards you. And your mercy is incredible. We receive aid, help, support, guidance every single day through your phalange of spirits and Jesus, who you sent our way, our guide and model, who is modeling to us perfection. We have all the tools. We have all the love, all the mercy, all the justice, and all the goodness from you. All we need to do is use it all in order to ascend, to purify ourselves, to align our will with your will. So we will graduate and can graduate to other worlds. And we do that through our incessant service, through our charity, practicing charity. Yes, there is the material charity, but above and beyond, we're invited by you to foster our moral charity, by seeing the good in everything and everybody, and being indulgent towards others' imperfections. For we know we are so imperfect still yet as well. And we're invited to always forgive everyone's trespasses, because again, we know we need to be forgiven too. Thank you, God, for allowing us to be here. Thank you for giving us this incredible information through Spiritism that makes our path so much easier. And so, God willing, so you willing, we will reconvene in a week with a continuation of this beautiful, illuminating chapter. Thank you. And so be it. Thank you, dear friends, for joining. Thank you, Kiki and Adriana. Hi, dear friend. Big hug. Big hug to all of you and many, many blessings. And so, God willing, we will see each other again next week, same time, same place, with a continuation of There is Many Dwellings in My Father's Home. God bless you.